One time he left me his number to call him if we ever needed anything. And I guess at this point I didn't really realize that his name wasn't Dad. And so I called the Georgia Strait, and the lady said, "Hey, how may I help you?" And I said, "Hey, is Dad there?" And she said, "Dad who?" And I said, "Dad Cadell." And then that day I remember he came back and had to tell me that his name wasn't actually Dad. It was pretty mind-blowing. And but yeah, he'll always be Dad to us, I think.
And incredibly smart. His mind just fascinated me, and I loved it that he could remember everything, and I thought he would be a wonderful person to have lots of children with because he'd never forget an important date or anniversary.
He was always showering us with love and affection, and he was always there for us. He was always caring for us, and we knew that he would do anything for us pretty much.
So humble, you know. I don't like to brag about myself, and so loving and caring. Always care about the other person more than them. They never bragged or complained, you know. And you could see that when my dad had cancer, you know, he never complained.
He never said anything bad about anybody. He was always such a kind person, and
just his way of loving to make people happy. That was one of his favorite things to do. Whenever there was like a big hockey trade that he knew we'd be excited about, he was the first person to tell us. He would love being the bearer of the news, and just that joyful sense that he always brings around with him.
Ever since I met him, the day we met, I remember the first day we met actually, I didn't really know who this man was, and I remember giving him a little shot and being like, "Who's this guy?" But he always treated me like a son, and he was always a gentleman to me.
His personality was quite humble in one way, and quite proud in another way, and somebody who could easily express his pride. And certainly he always talked with pride about his sons, but he also talked about his pride in our community. And he'd make you feel proud when he was talking to you and asking you questions.
It was probably Ian's sense of humor that attracted me to him. Because we were never going to agree on film.
His true belief and commitment to the film industry in Vancouver and in Western Canada, and his real enthusiasm for the people that he wrote about.
Two things when it came to Ian's writing. When the movie was good, we would talk about the movie, and when the movie wasn't so good, we talk about the actor.
He was the only person that I knew I could trust to do a great job and to carry on the positioning of the paper with the movie studios and the film community.
Ian was a phenomenal raconteur, that's indisputable. But he was also a wonderfully caring human being. He was one of the finest people I've ever worked with in my entire life. I can't say enough about Ian. I even get emotional right now thinking about him. He was so kind, he was so considerate. He was just a wonderful, wonderful human being, and I feel so privileged to have worked with him. I don't think I've ever worked with anyone who had that kind of combination of qualities. He was just an amazing human being.
He seemed to know a lot about everything.
I would run into Ian and something super dramatic or terrible had happened and he'd still have a smile on his face.
Try to remember the kind of September when life was slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September when grass was green and the grain was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a young and a callow fellow.
Roger Ebert, when he was asked about Canadian films, he said, I love the fact that they're able to get away with that they're able to make those films. We always know what the Canadian films are because they're films that American independent filmmakers could never get made. We have that opportunity now if we can go the next step and be competitive with those American art films and those American larger films over the next few years. If we can look at programs to do that and say, let's take it on. We've got the people, let's take it on. Then I think it might be possible.
You know, he brought a little bit of stardust because of his celebrity interviews, etc. But really, those stories were one aspect of who he was. The other aspect was he was teaching us our own story and making us feel like we were part of something and telling our story back to us and giving us more confidence. I really think that's true. He was like he's making the chronicles as we went. And it was very important because there were lots of places along the way that we lost confidence and were uncertain. And you know, that Real West magazine in particular would restore that and give people profile, and we could brag about each other to each other and see that we were actually something.
It's an us and them thing, and if us against them thing, and if Sheila Copps comes out tomorrow and says this is of great benefit to Indigenous producers, we just have to look at the political will. As long as Ontario and Quebec have the political clout and the members of the House of Commons that they have, we are not going to get any fair share, and it's certainly not worth the risk of losing this industry.
He was so dedicated to his work as a journalist. He loved it. He loved traveling. He loved writing, and he was very, very good at it. And he was amazingly productive in his writing.
Film festival has to be about the films. Once you get into the game of let's get these guests, or let's be about the guests, let's be about the celebrities, you get away from the film.
The thing about Ian, when he wrote, he cut to the chase. He went straight to the bottom line. In some cases, he gave you the punchline before the joke. He just blurted it out because he just had to get out the bottom line about the film. This film was a piece of shit.
Arnold is going to go in there and bring the movie business back from Canada. He's going to...
But sure.
Dad, he's going to, because he can. He's that guy. He's that image.
The thing that I admire most about Ian's writing was how incredibly prolific he was, and how dedicated he was to making sure that he gave everybody some ink.
Could end up being, because he's such a good actor, the best Bond, and the Bond that people remember like they remember Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan. He could be in that group.
I first met Ian when I was working in private radio in 1987, and he was this enthusiastic, energetic, just absolutely effervescent personality who taught me so much about movies. So I would put him on the radio, and he was what we would call a professional guest, because you just wind him up, let him go. The host can just kind of go on remote control, and Ian would carry the whole show. And that was why he was often a favorite of talk show producers around the city.
Him changing his mind obviously had a domino effect on a lot of people who suddenly said, well, gee, maybe it's not the right time or the right thing to do, because we do want to do, more with America, in America.
Before there was an internet movie database, there was Ian Cadell. And what was truly astonishing was his encyclopedic knowledge of the BC film industry, but the fact that that came from chronicling it. And I hope people realize just how much he had to do with putting BC film and keeping BC film on the map.
He was one of the most nurturing people I've ever met in the media in terms of helping people get ahead and helping people live their dreams.
Great for Adam. I mean, here's a guy who has worked really hard. He's 36, he's been making films since he was in his early 20s. He's a British Columbian, came out of Victoria. Obviously, it's great that he did that. I think, you know, what can you say more than that? Whether it does anything for Canadian film or other filmmakers like him who are from BC, that's a totally different question.
We are still Canadian, which means that we're not that good at bragging about ourselves. And I think the people in this community that gave it weight, you know, have a lot of skill and a lot of talent, and it's important for us to remember that. And I think Ian, he wasn't just a person who wrote about that. He was like a cheerleader that was there at every game.
Don't the hours go shorter as the days go by? We never get to stop and open our eyes. 1 minute you're waiting for the sky to fall, and next you're dazzled by the beauty of it all. Lovers in a dangerous time. Lovers in a dangerous time. These fragile bodies of touch and taste, this fragrant skin, this hair like lace, spirits open to a thrust of grace, never a breath you can afford to waste. Lovers in a dangerous time. Lovers in a dangerous time. Lovers in a dangerous time.
In 63 years, he had beautiful children. He had lovely, loving relationships, lots of people who loved him, lots of friends, wonderful professional stimulation, contributed greatly to film and pop culture and movies. He did a lot and he loved it. He had a great life. He was very rich.
He was a very, very kind man. Always wanted the best for all of us. Wanting to get to know everyone, wanting to make everyone feel comfortable. That was sort of what he thrived himself on.
That he would want us all to just be interesting, intelligent people, and to be kind and loving.
Well, I remember Ian being an encyclopedia of knowledge. He was a very smart, intelligent man, and he always, if you ever needed to know anything like who won the Stanley Cup in 1974, he would know right off the bat who had won and who had played in the Super Bowl or Stanley Cup in whatever year.
Ian would talk to people who were sports fanatics about sports. He would talk to movie fanatics about movies. He would talk to political fanatics about politics. He would talk to advertising fanatics about the advertising industry. Like, Ian was one of these people who had his mind, he could wrap his mind around any number of subjects.
He had so many interests, and he could tell what your interest was and then just build upon that. Like, we talked a lot about being parents, and we talked a lot about politics, but I thought those were Ian's interests, were like politics, the film industry, and then he listened to speak to someone else, and suddenly he's talking to them about what they're interested in. He'd always take what you're interested in and expound upon it and make it seem like that was his thing, and that was kind of that's a gift.
life imitated art in the film, which imitated life, which then went back to the film. And it's the overlapping that made the industry more real. And I mean, that was essentially it. He saw that there were a fantastic number of layers to the art of filmmaking, how people perceived it, how people enjoyed it. And that brought a new layer of Hollywood back to the people.
If you were watching CNN this morning, you probably saw this announcement.
Today, I ordered our armed forces to strike at terrorist-related facilities in Afghanistan and Sudan.
If that sounds like deja vu, then you probably watched a movie called Wag the Dog, in which Dustin Hoffman plays a producer who was asked by the White House to help cover up an alleged involvement with a campfire girl and the President of the United States.
Okay, and you want me to do what? We want you to produce. You want me to produce your war?
Not a war, it's a pageant. We need a theme, a song, some visuals. We need, it's a pageant. It's like the Oscars, that's why we came to you.
No matter what the request, the producer, played by Dustin Hoffman, who has been creating on-screen wars for 30 years, says, you think this is a big deal? This is nothing. This is nothing.
Try making the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Tell him, King.
3 of the horsemen died.
Hear what he's saying? 3 of the horsemen died 2 weeks before the end of principal photography. This is nothing. This is nothing. This is just Act 1, the war.
You have to wonder if Bill Clinton was sitting in Martha's Vineyard on vacation, thinking, Wag the Dog? That's a big deal? That's nothing. When I interviewed the director, Barry Levinson, last November, the Paula Jones scandal had just about played out. Would Americans be interested in a president with a scandal? He said, with Bill Clinton, it's never over. There's probably someone else out there with an even more interesting story. As Dustin Hoffman would say, Monica Lewinsky, that's nothing. So can Bill Clinton survive the prophecies of Barry Levinson? It's hard to say, but one thing's for sure. It's not just nothing anymore. For Broadcast One, I'm Ian Cadell.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet.
And I'm going to miss him a lot. And that's pretty much it.
No, he was a very sweet man.
It's hard to lose someone when you're this young, but at the same time, some people don't even get 21 years, and the amount of memories we've all had in this short time with him has been pretty incredible. So.